All right, welcome in everybody to the Important Nonsense Podcast. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Mike Manning. 32 teams in 32 days. It is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike, I know you are extremely excited for this show. I'm going to ask you to try to contain your joy and excitement.
I'll try to do that. I mean, obviously, as you can see from the background, I am a Steelers fan. I can't say I agree with everything they have done this offseason, but I will be there cheering them on the entire time.
That's what we like to hear. Neil, how you doing?
I was going to say, I was hoping you were going to go to me because I'm like, I'm doing fine, but you should ask our third person how they're doing.
Yeah.
And Mike, I maintain as we go through this, you should just start slowly taking things off the wall behind you and just putting them down on the floor.
Silent protest.
This is going to be rough, my friend. You had to sit with us through the bitter Bears fan show, so now turnabout is fair play. We're gonna go through. We're going to go through everything.
And it's ironic because we can share some sadness right off the top of the list here. We'll get into that.
Oh, yeah, we will. Well, I was going to say, we're going to cover everything from the problems at quarterback to them taking down the ketchup bottles. It's all sad, baby. None of it's good.
This picture is the inaugural game at Heinz Field, which is fitting.
It's a collector's item now.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Mm-hmm.
Get it autographed by the head of Heinz.
I forget that lady's name, but there is an actual lady that you could probably contact and get that signed.
Yeah, I'll look up the phone books after this.
Yeah, you work on that. It's August 12th that we are batch recording these. So if anything seems out of date, that would be why. You can catch up with us for the wrap-up show on August 26th. And that'll give you all the up-to-date information, check back on everything that we have gotten wrong or missed or has changed. But if you want to catch up with us before then, patreon.com/importantnonsense. Head on over there for the $5 tier, the highest tier we offer. You get everything, projections, rankings, the stat book, everything, including access to the Discord. Come talk to us, hang out, ask the nerd as many questions as possible. Just keep him entertained over there. He gets bored.
So he's bored. He's bored. Yeah. He needs something to do.
Yeah, just give him something to do over there.
He needs just questions there he can put in a fidget spinner or something. And
yeah, exactly.
Just keep himself 100%. Busy.
Yeah. One of those things from elementary school.
That's what I was. I was just gonna say that the little origami,
catcher thing. Yeah.
Yes.
RB1.
Will Davis Mills be a top 10 quarterback? No. We got to do that again. Will Davis Mills be a top 10 quarterback?
Who put all no's in here? Also, everything we do is for 12-team PPR. So again, if any of the rankings, projections, any of that seems slightly off, that would be why. So adjust accordingly. We will start at the top, and we will start at what is actually the top and not what Jack has as the top. Because that is the number 2. The top is Mitchell Trubisky. Bears starter for 3 seasons, goes over to Buffalo last year, talks about how great it was to be in such a different culture in Buffalo. Yeah, no shit. And I don't go blue on this show often, but come on.
I was going to say 13 plus, Steve. PG-13 show, sir. I'm usually the one who you have to chastise.
This is essentially cable. We can get away with it. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, if it's PG-13, you get 1 F-bomb per episode then.
Oh.
If that's how we're going to do that.
Keep that in my pocket.
Yeah, we'll hold on to that. Hey, it must be nice. It must have been nice just not having Ryan Pace just constantly belittling you in everything you do at every step of every
now you just have Mike Tomlin constantly belittling you on everything that you do.
Yeah, but he does it and he sounds good doing it. He's a great speaker.
Yes. Mike Tomlin is the author of several of the greatest sound bites post-game press conferences I've ever heard, especially the one where he's talking about cutting your eyelids off so that you never blink. That doesn't even make any sense, Mike Tomlin. Nothing you
sounded good coming out of his mouth.
It did sound good, and it's highly motivational. It is.
The story behind him, though, and again, I do say behind him, I find it highly unlikely Kenny Pickett is actually the starter, but he was the top quarterback drafted in this year's draft class. The only one in the top 2 rounds, Kenny Pickett at number 20.
Yep.
The way I have it projected out is Mitchell Trubisky for 10 games, Kenny Pickett for 7 games, that they will rotate him in at some point. You eventually have to see what you've got, right? Because it's not going to be Mitchell Trubisky's team for more than
The fan base
half
is
of
going to
this season.
demand it as well, is going to be the issue.
They're already demanding it in training camp with a single incompletion from Trubisky. They're chanting Pickett's name.
100%. The greater point here is this is what they wanted. They wanted a game manager in Trubisky to not push the ball down the field, to apparently never throw to the left. Just hope that whoever you have in fantasy lines up on the right side of the field and you'll be fine.
It's a true story.
Just hand the ball off to Najee Harris and let the defense stop the other team and hope that you win 10-7. That's basically what you're looking for if you're the Steelers this season.
This team is looking to go to the early 2000s.
Yes. Do we have any reason to believe that Kenny Pickett, the conversation is just how many games, really?
Mm-hmm.
But how many games do you think for Kenny Pickett? Like I said, I've got it as 10 Trubisky and 7 for Pickett. Is that right on? Is that too little, too much?
I think Pickett has fewer.
You think it's more of a redshirt season?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit more of a redshirt season too. I think Trubisky probably gets to at least 10 games minimum. I think what you're projecting is like the floor for how many games I think Trubisky's actually going to play. At some point, I agree that he's going to go back to his natural habitat that he discovered in Buffalo of wearing a hat and holding a clipboard, because he looked great doing that. He was second to none at wearing that hat and holding that clipboard. But I think given what they're trying to do this year, I think the Steelers as an organization, don't tell people that I used to know back in Ohio that I said this, but I think they're actually very smart. And I think they know that they're probably not going to win anything this year, given the division that they're going to have to play in. And I think that the goal realistically is, if we can't do the ground and pound and defense and grind you out philosophy, then, hey, maybe we'll just be bad for the first time in forever. And then we'll get an actual draft pick that we can use. And whether that's Kenny Pickett or whether that's something else that we desperately need, we'll go ahead and do that. So why risk Kenny Pickett coming in half cocked stall that out for as long as we can, have Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph donate their bodies to this because they don't matter. And then we'll give Pickett the full job more than likely next year because he was a first round pick.
What I would say too is I feel like there's going to be pressure because of the first round draft capital to kind of see what they have in him at some point, which is why I went with the 7 games. But I'm with Mike, more of the less games, more red shirt, in the idea that, remember, what was that, 2019? So 3 years ago now, they went 8-8 with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. I mean, the defense can carry this team to a 500 record on its own.
Yep.
And all Mitch Trubisky has to do is not crash the car. So if they're winning enough games and he's just competent enough to not lose them games, he's going to continue to start, because they're not going to risk a playoff spot to just for the sake of giving the rookies.
Sorry, I'm just picturing Mitchell Trubisky being sponsored by like Root Insurance, because that's really what it should be. Like that's why I was smiling. That's where my brain went. Like, sorry, I didn't hear anything you said. I just went into my own little fantasy.
Well, and even forgetting their own, team history, and forgetting what they have done in recent history. Look at Trubisky himself. 2018, the Bears went 12-4. And they made the playoffs because the defense played really well. He had good weapons around him, and he just didn't crash the car. They went 8-8 the following season in 2019 and had an okay, mediocre season because the defense was good enough to carry it. That's the exact same thing Pittsburgh wants him to do here. Just be good. Don't be great. Don't win us any games. Just be good enough for the defense to keep us in it. Yeah.
Before we go too further down this rabbit hole, because it is entertaining, but here's what I will say. I don't really care about the split as much, because as far as redraft goes, I don't want either. This is just too much of a headache to make me want to care.
I will go back to what show was it we were talking about? Oh, the Jets. When we were talking about
good
Zach
enough to
Wilson.
not crater out the skill position guys. That's where you want to go.
That's the discussion.
Sure,
because neither one of these guys matters at all in any way, shape, or form for fantasy this season. Kenny Pickett's a name to know for Dynasty, to hold on to for future use. but that's it. Neither one of these is redraft worthy. It matters to me because, as we've talked about a few times throughout this process, the rookie is the unknown. So we know what we're getting with Mitch Trubisky. We know what he was able to do with Allen Robinson. We know what he was able to do producing different fantasy options from the Bears for his stretch as the starter. We have no idea what Kenny Pickett is going to do. We have no idea who his favorite target is going to be or where he's going to put the ball or how accurate he's going to be on the field when he's got an NFL defense coming after him. So to me, the more games that Mitchell Trubisky plays, the better it is for the skill position guys on the Steelers who you actually do want to invest in.
Yeah, because if we're looking at it, Trubisky doesn't run the ball enough to matter for fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
He obviously, like we saw with Allen Robinson, targeted it over 150 more times than any other receiver in his 3 seasons that he was there and starting.
Mm-hmm.
And he targeted the running backs at the 5th highest rate from 2018 to 2020. That is a lot to do with Cohen lining up at the receiver position a lot.
Right.
But the 2 positions you want to care about, wide receiver 1, running back, he can make fantasy relevant.
Running back, Najee Harris. I've got him number 5 in my projections here. And checking my rankings, I've got him number 4. Neil, you've got him 5. Mike, you got him 4. ECR 5. So we all agree Najee Harris top 5. Is there, again, this feels more open and shut. Don't need to spend a ton of time on it. Is there anything really to talk about here? I mean, ADP is 5. He's a guy going in essentially the top 6 picks of every draft you're in.
He should be an unbelievable volume monster, given what we just talked about with the quarterback position and what this team is going to want to do with the ground and pound and defense and grind you out philosophy that they're likely going to employ here. And we all agree Najee Harris is a superior talent. He should be uniquely suited to do the job they're asking him to do. And really, I don't think there's too much to worry about here. I'd feel very secure about this. The one thing I will say is there's no handcuff. So if you care about that, if you care about that as far as securing your guy when you spend a first-round pick, but no one cares. But no one really cares about that. It's just a thing to note. And that's really it.
That was my other note, was just like, yeah, sure, maybe they want to take the pressure off of him, but with who? I mean, Benny Snell is terrible.
So is Anthony
McFarland has never been given a shot, but even the couple chances he's had has not looked great. And then Jeremy McNichols, there's a reason he bounces from team to team.
He's a guy. That's a body.
So he's just a warm body to have out there. None of these guys would have any value at all. It would be a complete car wash. And this is another situation where we've talked about in the past. If something happens to Harris, they probably trade for a guy.
Or they sign Devonta Freeman off the street.
They sign someone off the street. They trade for Damian Harris, who we talked about the other day.
That'd be a good one.
They make a trade for some disgruntled running back somewhere.
Miles Sanders. Doesn't even have to leave the state.
Something.
3-hour drive.
They would pick up someone else. Again, we've talked about it several times in the past. I think this is the first time I've said it this year, surprisingly. But if you're asking me who is the handcuff to Najee Harris, it's Mr. Not on the roster right now.
Right. I mean, if you're looking at Harris, obviously touch monster, as we said. He had 47 more touches than the third running back in terms of touches, like for the NFL. So he had 381. Jonathan Taylor was 9 behind him. And then Joe Mixon was 47 behind him.
Yeah.
So it's just those 2 and then everybody else.
Yep.
In terms of just being the guy.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at
he doesn't get talked about in the same class as CMC and Taylor.
So if you're looking at the offensive scheme, this is supposedly going to more of a run offense, rush first offense, which would mean probably even more touches for him.
Yeah.
He's not going to have quite as many receptions. Obviously, that kind of dampens his upside in terms of the fantasy a little bit. But this team was 25th in rushing last year in terms of rush rate. If Harris does better on the ground, I think, than in receiving, especially whenever it's a late in the clock dump off by noodle arm Big Ben, where he's likely just to get tackled in the yard anyways.
Right.
Rather just give him the ball in the backfield and let him actually know he's going to get the ball and do it.
So let's go to wide receiver. Diontae Johnson is the fourth most targeted wide receiver in the NFL over the past 2 seasons. He's dealing with a new QB in 2022. His drop rate, which was a huge talking point, went from 13.7 in 2020 to just 5.3 last year. Drops are fluky. I mean,
yeah.
There are some guys that consistently drop the ball, and there are some guys who just most guys it's up and down. It's hard to rely on every year. He had 10 plus targets in 11 of his 17 games in 2021, 1 game with less than 5 receptions. That's pretty solid. He split snaps at the left wideout and the right wideout in each season of his career. I have him as a top 10 guy. I still have him number 7. Neil, you've got him at 13, Mike 14. The ECR is 15. And right now in ADP, he is going at wide receiver 14. To me, this is a steal. To me, I still have him as a top 10 guy because we talked about the volume. And you mentioned, Mike, the Allen Robinson effect. My whole thing is you have to be nervous about Pickett. How often is he going to play? How many games does he get? But if you're telling me a majority of the season is going to be Mitchell Trubisky under center, then Johnson is the Allen Robinson in this offense from what Trubisky was dealing with in Chicago. He's going to be the volume monster. He's going to be the one leading this team by a wide margin in targets, and in PPR, targets and opportunities are king.
Mm-hmm. That's how you make your hay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't blame this at all. Like, I don't blame your top 10 at all. He's in a cluster of guys that are target monsters, alphas in their offense, like Michael Pittman, Rashad Bateman, Diontae Johnson. Like, these are guys that are going to be the number ones, and they're very talented. So if you chose Pittman over Johnson, I don't blame you. If you chose Johnson over Bateman, I don't blame you. Like, these are guys that it's going to be a pick your poison type tier. This offense is going to, like I said earlier, be a run first offense. I'm curious as to how much of their run first it's going to be. Like, are we going to go top 3 in the NFL type? That's kind of scary.
Right.
And we also don't know, like, I mean, it's still Mitchell Trubisky. We haven't seen him in a while actually pass. He's run the ball plenty and handed off plenty in Buffalo. But we haven't seen him pass enough.
Steve and I have seen enough historically, let me tell you. Seen more than enough.
There's a general upgrade over Big Ben's corpse that was the past 2 seasons since his elbow surgery.
That's true.
That was my argument as well. Last season, there were only 8 wide receivers who had 17 or more points per game, and Diontae Johnson was one of them with Ben's noodle arm. So you would have to believe that a healthy Mitchell Trubisky is at least as good as a disintegrating Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, and all I'm going to say is this, Mike. You went exactly where I was going to go. I'm not going to look at you sideways if I see somebody wanting to take, Diontae in the top 10 at wide receiver. I'm not. I understand why you want to do that because I don't believe in any of his competition at this point anyway. So if there's anybody who's going to get that Allen Robinson treatment to what Steve was saying, yeah, it's Diontae Johnson. I think we can all feel pretty confident about that. My only concern why I don't want to go higher is the overall run rate. If they do suddenly become the 3rd run heaviest team or whatever in the NFL, would it actually be possible for Diontae Johnson to get inside of that top 10 comfortably? It might be, but you combine that with the idea that Trubisky's probably not playing the whole season, and then we just don't know what Kenny Pickett is going to be. Those are my little warts that prevent me from wanting to move him up any higher than what I already have. Not a comment on the player. And by the way, if this all works out great next year, would it shock anyone if Diontae Johnson was firmly in the top 10 for everyone industry-wide? Wouldn't shock me.
Well, he's going to be somewhere else, I believe, next season too. So
that's fair. That's fair.
Did he get the extension?
Did they do that? Well, Mike, you would
did.
know.
He signed a 2-year extension, so he's
Oh,
going to be
okay.
here for 2 more seasons after this season.
Then my comment stands.
Then never
So-
mind. I
so
take it
this-
all back. You know
the
what?
only
I'll just
thing
cut that out.
That also becomes a bit of the only other thing that comes still a bit of a question is we also don't know if, like, I understand that Allen Robinson and Mitch Trubisky had great chemistry and he like just went for it straight for him basically all the time.
Right.
We don't have a guarantee that him and Diontae are going to have that rapport.
Yeah.
And
it'll automatically.
We don't know that. I
there's a
feel
deeper
good about it,
talent-
but we don't know that.
There's a deeper talent pool here outside of the wide receiver 1 than there was in Chicago.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
They actually have a wide receiver too. So.
And 3.
They have a couple of them.
Yeah.
Well, should we talk? Well, should we talk about them? I guess we should talk about them.
So, well, I
Sadly,
do
we
want to
have
put one final note on it. So, we're talking about them becoming more run heavy. Last season, Baltimore was actually the team that was the 3rd run heaviest in the league. They had 517 total rushes last year, and they were still top 10 in pass attempts. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could run the ball more this season and just have more total plays because potentially maybe they're chasing more. But
I mean, they were one of the worst first half teams and better second half teams in the NFL.
yeah, so we'll see. But yes, we'll move on. They drafted George Pickens in the 2nd round. They still have Chase Claypool lurking around over there. Claypool is the guy that I have projected as 2nd in targets currently and as their number 2 wide receiver. However, man, George Pickens, he graded out really well. It looked like he was going to fall into a situation where he could be potentially like, imagine if he's the guy that goes to Atlanta with Drake London and it's the 2 of them and he's just a locked in number 2. I'd feel great about him as a top 40 prospect this season, getting the opportunities. Whereas now he's kind of the 3rd wheel, but I think his talent is going to push him into that number 2 role sooner rather than later.
Boy, you think George Pickens is better than Anthony Miller? I don't know.
It's tough, right?
Oh, man.
Pretty sure Anthony Miller, there's a video of him catching 7 punts at one time. So there's that. He just did it in this training camp, so you know.
What about all the videos of Anthony
that's what
Miller
he's doing
looking
in his
terrible
training
historically?
camp.
I got a
Okay,
lot of
good.
video of that too.
But he
Good
caught
to
7
know.
balls in the punts at one time. That's impressive.
Okay, great.
No.
So for your kick and punt returns, the scoring league, Anthony Miller. Okay.
Yeah.
If you have receptions at once as a scoring system,
Yes.
maybe.
Oh, you get like a multiplier?
Yeah.
I like
don't
that.
know.
I like that idea. If you
Like
can
a
catch 7
combo?
yeah, you get like 7x. So it's worth
Yeah.
like 35. I like that.
Could be good. I don't know how that works in NFL football, but you know.
We have so little to talk about. We're talking about not.
Well, so Mike, what is your take here? This is your team. I'm a little bit closer on between Claypool and Pickens than you are, but we all have it roughly the same, except Neil, who's punting the rookie, which I can't blame you for that.
I
I'll get
mean,
into why in a moment too.
Claypool sat there and perception is really down on him, even though he literally had like the exact same season 2 seasons in a row. Just his
Glad you
touchdowns
brought that
were
up, by the way, because I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because
He
they're
literally
fading him
had-
now, and I'm like, it's the same thing.
He had 103
Nothing has
targets,
changed.
62 receptions, 873 yards, and 9 touchdowns his rookie year. Sophomore year, 103 targets, 59 receptions, 860 yards, but 2 touchdowns.
Yes, the touchdowns is the difference. Yeah.
Right.
Identical.
So
Literally,
9
everything else
touchdowns,
is exactly the same.
but otherwise, yes, exactly the same numbers, consistent,
there's-
except for
Yeah.
the touchdowns.
He didn't have as many big plays. The flashes weren't there. It was more of the contested catches instead of the catch and run that he had his rookie year. So it didn't look as good. And the perception of him, whenever it came to his stupid, I'm going to have a celebration about a first down when there's less than a minute left and we're still down by 8. That didn't help his case either.
Right.
It's true.
So George Pickens has been lighting stuff up in training camp. I thought he was one of the most talented receivers coming into this class.
Yeah.
Was really happy that they picked him. And now that Diontae Johnson has signed an extension, maybe Claypool is the one that should be worrying instead of Diontae.
Hey,
Not
did
that
you
I
guys
thought
know
Diontae should
Diontae
worry for
Johnson
this
signed
year.
an extension? I think we should mention that at some point.
I like Diontae a lot. I don't like Claypool that much. If you couldn't tell.
No, it doesn't come through at all.
No.
Well, Jack's gonna have words with you, by the way, at some point about this. But
Okay.
from my end, Mapletron, as they call him up there. They do. They call him Mapletron north of the border. It's a good nickname, but it would be more effective if he was a little better. But here's all I'll say: we talk about this every year. Touchdowns are fluky. It's really hard to predict touchdowns. So when you go from 9 touchdowns to 2 touchdowns, you're going to have a dip in fantasy production. But all of his other metrics are the same. And I am just watching this salt factory in the industry and on the internet amongst regular people talking about how Chase Claypool is terrible. And I'm like, it's the same thing. He's had the same job. Why are you so mad? And it's because it's the people that missed out on those 7 touchdowns last year that were counting on him. And this is what I'm trying to tell people, is this is why I don't really want to get involved in Chase Claypool super heavily and never did, because it's similar to the conversation we were having about Devonta Smith yesterday. When your job is to be the guy that runs down the field with his hand up, it's really hard to predict what your actual volume and stuff is going to be year on year, and it creates this weird volatility. Because if you have 9 touchdowns, yeah, people are going to love you and sing your name from the mountaintops. But when you only have 2, all other things being equal, you've missed out on whatever 6 times 7 is that I'm failing to do live in front of people. No one told me there would be math. No one told me there would be math. But yeah, forgive the fact that I can't do basic math. But you're going to miss out on 42 points, and that's going to be a huge problem for folks. So I think people are just bitter because of 2021, and they are mad. It's crazy to me how quickly that's changed.
It's also the fact of like the highlight reel was there in 2020. Like he was having jet sweep touchdowns. He was having running past a defender down the sideline for 70-yard touchdowns. They were just more boom type touchdowns or like out of the ordinary things. This past season, it was more of a contested catch in the corner of the end zone or a slant inside the 5, like things like that. People aren't going to get excited about it, and obviously it was only 2. So
I think it's a combination of a few things. It's the getting burned, like we're talking about. But again, just look at the numbers that he put up and the consistency that he, like you're saying, he basically had the exact same season 2 years in a row. And if you just took the names off of it and just put those numbers on it and said, oh, it's the exact same season, except one was huge in touchdowns and one wasn't, I would say, oh, you're probably talking about Mike Williams. Because tell me that's not Mike Williams. And yet Mike Williams is
they are very similar to
and yet Mike Williams is consistently a top 30 guy. And I think part of the issue here is, again, the quarterback situation. Is people are now seeing, okay, well, he's getting Trubisky or he's getting the rookie. I don't love it. And it already burned out last season, so I'm going to fade it even more this year.
Yep.
So I feel like it's a combination of a couple of things. But like I said, George Pickens, to me, I feel like is worth a flyer late. 100%, you got to draft him in Dynasty.
That's the one. That's okay. So yeah, Pickens to me is really a Dynasty name, because Pickens for Dynasty, I'm all about this, because I think long term he's going to be a name.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's going to be a name you need to know,
because
he's going to be a fixture in the Steelers wide receiver room for at least 4 seasons. At least 4. And he might be there for longer. He grades out super well. He's a supremely talented individual. It's just, for me, I think they're going to kind of give him more or less a redshirt year, which is why he'd be worth a flyer at the end of your draft. But I think that because he's a rookie and he's going to have some weirdness at quarterback and they're starting to go run heavy, that it's going to be hard to really want to count on it. It's worth a flyer if you want to take one at the end of your draft. But for me, this is a name for me for next year. That's why I've lowered him a little bit in the rankings. But for next year, especially with Chase Claypool probably either coming to the end of his contract or even playing somewhere else, George Pickens becomes highly interesting in future seasons. It's just for this year, I don't know that I want to count on it. The good news here is that even if you do want to pick it up at the end of your draft, you really don't have to invest very much.
Yeah. In the pre-draft process, he was my number 7 prospect among all positions. He was the number 4 wide receiver. So like I said, if he landed in the right situation, then
if he went to Tennessee, would he not be getting the Treylon Burks treatment that we're right. Yeah.
The only players I had ahead of him at wide receiver were Burks, London, and Olave. That's it. So he was the clear number 4 for me. And he lands in a situation where, again, like we're saying, if he takes over that number 2 slot, he's going to have a role and have value. And for me, I would take the late round flyer on it because I just think he's too good to not see the field. Calvin Austin is also a name to know. They're going to use him gadget-wise, fit him into this offense somewhere, and he's going to probably end up as a punt/kick returner. But again, he's too small. He's a locked-in slot guy, and with Claypool ahead of him, it's going to be tough for him to see the field a lot this season. Tight end. Pat Freiermuth. He had one of the best seasons by a rookie tight end in years. He was just overshadowed by Kyle Pitts because a lot of things are overshadowed by Kyle Pitts. He's a big man.
Reasonable.
A position notorious for slow starts. Even so, he never reached 60 receiving yards in a game and was saved by 7 receiving touchdowns. So you're saying he was the reverse Chase Claypool? He was the reason Claypool wasn't getting
all 7 of Chase Claypool's
literally all 7.
There you go.
Apparently that's how that works.
Yeah, he had 497 receiving yards in 2021, less than Tyler Conklin, Jared Cook, or Tyler Higbee. Yuck. I've got him at 13, Neil 11, Mike 8. The ECR has him at 10. And right now in ADP, he's going at 11. But again, we have said it time and time again, and we will continue to say it. That is the dart throw, please score a touchdown area of tight end. If you want to take a shot on him, by all means, go for it. But I'm not twisting your arm to go get Pat Freiermuth.
Do not reach, do not overpay. And keep in mind that he scored those 7 touchdowns with the corpse of Ben Roethlisberger needing a safety blanket to dump things off to over the middle. Well, I do think that there is a real chance that Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett will both also need a safety blanket to dump stuff off to over the middle. There is no guarantee that it will be Pat Freiermuth. That is the one giant red flag that I see with trying to use last year's numbers to project this year's numbers for Pat Freiermuth. So I wouldn't reach on it. If he fell to me, great. I have no problem with it. I'll live with it, but I'm not going out of my way to acquire it. Sorry, FF nerd. I know how much this means to you, and I just insulted your entire belief system, but it's how I feel.
Pretty much, yeah.
He was so excited whenever Kenny Pickett was drafted, and I was explaining how good it was for like Diontae Johnson, and then I said underneath for Freiermuth, and then he just started like fist pumping and everything. And I was like, all right, it's not that good for Freiermuth.
Jason's all-men team is like David Mills at quarterback, Brandon Cooks is the wide receiver 1, Pat Freiermuth at TE.
I'm writing that down. We need a nerd all-Madden team at the end of every season. That's what we need. Yeah, put that one in the idea jar.
That's what I'm here for.
Nerd all-Madden team. I love it.
They don't pay me for my looks.
Yep, it's a bunch of beefy white dudes that are just it's Davis Mills and Pat Freiermuth and Hunter Renfrow and Hunter.
Oh yeah, Hunter Renfrow's playing slot. Oh yeah, yeah, that's happening.
100%. I mean, again, there's not a lot to talk about here. I did forget, by the way, after we already moved on from it, but I forgot that Anthony Miller played for the Bears at the same time as Mitch Trubisky.
I know, that's why I was making.
I was just like, what were his numbers throwing touchdowns to tight ends? And he did throw 6 to Trey Burton one season, but he threw 7 to Anthony Miller. When Anthony Miller
I'm pretty sure all of those were against the Lions, though.
Yeah, pretty much. And he was like 6th on the team in targets, but somehow number 1 in receiving touchdowns. They were using Anthony Miller like a tight end. So, yeah, there you go. Defense and kicker.
Yeah, let's do it.
Pittsburgh number 5 in my projections. And let's see. Oh, the number 14 in ADP. So there you go. Could be a value. And I believe a lot of that is going to be sack based. They do turn the ball over, but yeah, you get a point per sack in most standard scoring systems. So that's why I'm interested in Pittsburgh. I also think the defense is too good to ever give up way too many points. They're one of those defenses where no matter the matchup, you're still going to feel okay starting them. It's like I could pick up some other defense to play, but I'm not going to cut the Steelers to have somebody else just pick them up and play them anyway. I'll take the 2 or 3 points they give me this week because I know they can give me a 20 next week. And then what do you think about the Chris Boswell extension, Mike? Why don't you break that down for us?
I mean,
All right, good night,
he's
folks.
a very reliable kicker. I'm happy with it.
Sorry, I just want to make sure we got all the extensions in on this.
He's one of the few players
that
overcame the yips, especially at the kicker position. So, hooray. Good for him.
He did it. We did it.
All right.
But yeah, from a fantasy perspective, I don't care. I'm not interested in Chris Boswell at all. Kicker is the kicker is the kicker is the kicker. That's it. We made it without Mike having to cry more than twice. So
he also managed to not have to throw up in a wastebasket that he's got off screen just in case something like that was to happen. All his stuff stayed on the wall.
What a professional.
Didn't have to do that either.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't let my fandom overtake my fantasy input. I can tell you that.
Well, we can't say the same thing, but that's okay. That's all right. Done with Pittsburgh. Tomorrow we will be back to talk about San Francisco. And until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!